Swati ma'am, please invite Deshmukh sir.
Deshmukh sir, can you hear me? Still participants are entering.
Yes, I'm here in the meeting. You can proceed.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. So let me start today's session.
Just a minute, ma'am. Swati ma'am, I'm making it live. Just give me 1 minute, so.
Yes, sir. What?
Ma'am, we can start now.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir. So good afternoon, all. On behalf of MSI, I'm here to welcome you all. So we have respected Deshmukh sir, President MSI Unit, MSI India, Dr. Shilpa Jani ma'am, she's President MSI Gujarat and Goa State, Dr. Vijay Kumar, Regional Coordinator, Saurashtra and Kutch region, dear participants, research scholars, academicians, students from all. So, dear participants, please mute yourself. So, on behalf of all, I welcome our today's expert, Dr. Tikam Chand Dhakal. Dr. Tikam Chand Dhakal is Dr. Tikam Dhan Jhakar is currently working as an assistant professor in the Genome and Computational Biology Lab of Department of Biotechnology, Mohanlal Sudhekar University, Udaipur, Rajasthan. Dr. Dhakar has more than 12 years of research and teaching experience. He pursued his PhD studies from University of Modena and Reggio Emilia, Italy, and has postdoctoral experience from University of Montella, Canada, and University of Bordeaux, France. Sir has more than 40 publications in peer-reviewed journals of international review. Sir has been conferred with prestigious Federation of European Microbiological Societies Young Scientist Award by FEMS Society of Germany in 2013. Sir is in editorial board of several reputed journals such as Frontiers in Microbiology, Frontiers in Genetics, to name a few. Currently, he is engaged in elucidation of cellular and molecular mechanism of diseases such as cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, diabetes, and cardiovascular disorders. Sir has conducted a substantial research work on novel coronavirus and has also designed a therapy for prevention of COVID-19, about which he will talk in more details in our today's session. Deshmukh sir,
Hello, hello.
yes sir.
Yes, yes, Swati. I will not talk much, but the Gujarat unit is doing very well. I am very happy. Gujarat unit is doing independently. And there are many hidden talent brains in India in microbiology. We want to give platform to them. And you are doing very well. Every Sunday you are arranging one lecture.
पहले मना कर देते.
Only the request is that everyone should take precaution that mute your mic and permit for a best session. Thank you, Dr. Tikam.
Tikam sir,
Yeah. Yes, I'm here. I was just waiting for Professor Deshmukh Shah to please finish with his speech. And I am very honored to have you here, all participants who have come here to listen me. And first of all, I would like to thank Professor Arvind Deshmukh Shah, President, Microbiologist Society of India, for giving me this opportunity. I'm also thankful to Professor Shilpa Jani Madam. Thanks to Dr. Vijay also and Dr. Swati also for inviting me here and introducing me like in a very beautiful way. I'm not like very big expert, but of course, yes, I am doing some research. Last year, I had 16 publications in 1 year. So I'm trying my level best to do something for this scientific community. And that's what basically we are for. So in today's talk, we all know that now it's the era of coronavirus. It's not the era of, we cannot say like it's the era of something else, but it's the era of coronavirus. So today, what knowledge we have as a professor or as an academician or as a scientist, the same amount of information a common person has also the same amount of information. I hope you all will agree with this, that we cannot say that we have more information on, especially in context to coronavirus. Maybe if we talk about the scientific things, maybe we can have more information than the common persons, commoners. We can have more information. But when we are talking about the coronavirus, we have the same information as a layman, as a common person in the society have. So in the today's talk, I would feel like I hope we all are from the scientific background. So the theme of my presentation, is a mysterious spike protein of SARS coronavirus 2. So until now, what we have seen is that the pathogenicity of coronavirus is very high.
Tikam sir.
Yes, sir.
Sorry to interrupt you. Definitely, speakers would like to view you. So can you please switch on your, because your slides are not visible.
No, so, slideshow I am doing right now. Okay, I can start now with this slideshow.
Please switch on your video, so it will be nice for all to have at least we are on the virtual platform, but at least that will be.
No, it's okay. No, it's okay. It's okay. So okay, yeah, I am sharing my slides.
Yes, yes.
I hope my slides are visible now.
Yes, sir.
So
yes,
I wanted to share my slide, but before that, I just wanted to give a small, brief introduction about the SARS coronavirus. So,
Not an issue. Not an issue.
so the
You
topic of
start,
my presentation.
Dr. Tikam,
Sure, sir.
you
Yes,
start
sir.
your video also.
Yeah, okay, sir. I will do that also. Yeah, wait, sir, please. So I hope now I'm visible.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
sir. Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Okay, okay, okay. I got your point, sir. No problem. So, see, here we are talking about the mysterious spike protein of SARS coronavirus. So, until now, what we have seen is that the pathogenicity of this virus is very high, that we all know. We know that this transmission of this virus is also very high. From person to person is very high. That's why we get infected with this virus very easily. And when, like, there used to be some peaks, so during that time we have to be very, very careful, because that time the large amount of population have this infection. So when more people have this type of infection, we have to be more careful. But the mystery is, all mystery is lying in the spike protein of the SARS coronavirus. If we talk about the pathogenicity of also, it is lying in the spike protein. If we talk about the transmission or other aspects of the coronavirus pathophysiology, that are all related with the spike protein. So in this presentation, in today's presentation, what I will be doing here is that I would be like, already I have given a brief introduction. I would give a little bit brief introduction once again, but that would be like just for 5 minutes. And then I will be talking about the spike protein and what are the mysteries that are present in this spike protein, and how we have unraveled those mysteries that are present in this spike protein, and how those mysteries are resolving the question of complex pathophysiology of SARS coronavirus 2, why we used to have a complex type of symptoms when we are getting infected with the SARS coronavirus 2. Like, I mean to say, why we have fever, why do we have like coughing. So fever is something related to, like, as if we are infected with malaria. Coughing, we used to cough as if we are infected with Mycobacterium tuberculosis, or we are having some influenza or something like that. So there is this mystery is everything lying in the spike protein. That is the first protein of the SARS coronavirus that interacts with the host immune system or host cells. Then the third part of my presentation would be the ATTA chelation therapy and the RGT peptide based therapy. These two therapies that I have designed based on my own research work that has already been published also, and that has been also recognized by the MHRD government of India also. And about that, I have already given us like almost like 10-12 lectures I have already given on that particular therapy. So that's why for this presentation, I have kept something new that was related with the mysteries of the spike protein. So if we talk about the first part, introduction to SARS coronavirus, we all know that the SARS coronavirus is like just a hell to this planet. We cannot go outside. We cannot, like, students cannot play, kids cannot play. We cannot marry like this. Limited number of guests like this, and everything we have to do online, especially in context when we are talking about the online classes. So we are taking the classes, I am taking the classes, I am not sure whether my students, like, they are virtually also they are in real present or not. It's not sure, because they can just put their photo and I can say that yes, of course they are all are present. So so the thing is that we just have to stay at our home, and we have to be safe at our place. So as Professor Deshmukh Saab and Professor Silpa Jani ma'am and Dr. Vijay and Swati, I hope you all are from the microbiological field, and this is the platform of the microbiological societies, microbiologist society of India. So it's a better to start with the microbiology, that we all know that is nothing, that is not nothing new here. That the SARS coronavirus, it is basically from this order of nidovirus. It's a family of coronaviridae, And we have a different type of SARS coronavirus. Is alpha coronavirus, beta coronavirus, gamma coronavirus, delta coronavirus. And you all know, like I already mentioned, that what we know also as a layman person, other persons also know that the variant now we are facing is the delta coronavirus. So everything is more or less very obvious and very clear and very understood and is known to all. We know about the outbreak of the SARS coronavirus. I do not want to go into more details about this. This is the pandemic where we can just say that, oh God, please mercy on us, because the whole planet is going to be red now. So here is something that I would like to stress something upon. The thing here is that when we say is a novel SARS coronavirus, it is really not a novel SARS coronavirus, because from 1930s, we are getting infected with this type of virus. So we cannot say it is a novel SARS coronavirus. In this particular century, also in 21st century, also, if I want to mention here that the mankind was infected with the SARS coronavirus 1 in 2003 and 4. Then also the MERS SARS coronavirus in 2013, 14, somewhere during that particular time. And now in 2019 and 20, we got infected, and in 21, we got infected with the SARS coronavirus too. But there are some questions that has arisen in everybody's mind. Just to give some data on that in case of SARS coronavirus 1, in 8 months, 26 countries was affected by that particular virus, and there were only 8,000 patients and 700 deaths reported approximately. But when we talk about the SARS coronavirus 2, within 6 months, more than 200 countries got affected. More than 70 lakh people, people got infected with this particular virus, and that's were like almost like half of that already died by that time. This was the source from the WHO website. So what we can say here that what we can rule out from here is that this is the high transmission of the virus that I already mentioned, the high infectivity of the virus that I already mentioned. Here the situation is very clear, is that this virus is very dangerous. This virus is very dangerous as compared to the previous viruses. But why this virus is very, very dangerous? Because we had the same type of virus previously. The same virus earlier also, that was the SARS coronavirus 1. Okay, and now we have the SARS coronavirus 2. So why this virus is is a very infective, that we have to find out. So I did some research on this particular virus, and that I would like to show, but just I like to finish with this one. This is the natural history of the SARS coronavirus. I already talked about this, that this is not a novel coronavirus. From 1930s, we are getting infected with such type of viruses. So this is all I already mentioned. This is not I wanted to mention here. This I will take for later. And these are the symptoms that all we know. That the SARS corona, when any patient is getting infected, any person is getting infected with the SARS coronavirus, the most common features, the most common clinical signatures or clinical signs or pathophysiological signatures that we see is the fever, cough, and then there's sputum formate, that muscles, they problems in the muscles, they aching in the muscles. So these symptoms, these are not like these are complex pathophysiological symptoms. If we talk about the normal disease, one disease is giving us 1 or 2, 3 symptoms, but in case of SARS coronavirus, we are having almost like more than 20 symptoms when we are getting infected with SARS coronavirus 1. So this type of complex pathophysiology of this particular virus was not understood at the earlier point of time, when we had the first lockdown due to SARS coronavirus in March or April in 2020. From that time, because I do not had the access to go to my laboratory, just do some experiments here and do some research or do some pending work there. So because of that, I started doing some research, and everything what I am showing here, the complex pathophysiology, why we have the complex pathophysiology of the SARS coronavirus, and why we have the complex many types of symptoms, that all I researched out within 1 or 2 months of the lockdown. Within the period of the lockdown, I published these two manuscripts where I found out the reason that why we have the complex pathophysiology, and what could be the possible treatment therapy beside designing no other type of drugs, or beside designing the vaccines also. So uh, so with this I just want to skip this one, because this is about the drug repurposing and other things. So this is about the conclusion of first part. So I'm just coming to my second part. So regarding the complex pathophysiology, what I researched out is that we have the spike protein of the SARS coronavirus. So what I did, I tried to see that what are the antigenic sites that are present in the SARS coronavirus 2. Okay, antigenic sites that we all know that these are the basically site. I am also a teacher of immunology, so I, if in case if there is any confusion to anyone, so they can just stop me also in between. I have no problem, or maybe at the end they can ask some questions related to the immunological point of view of the SARS coronavirus. So this SARS coronavirus 2 is they have the antigenic sites. They have like antigenic site. The protein has the antigenic site. Not all protein is antigenic, but each protein used to have some antigenic sites. So we have to just focus on that particular type of antigenic site. So the meaning is here is that the whole protein of the SARS spike protein is not antigenic. Only the part of that particular spike protein that we call as the antigenic sites or the antigenic determinants, only those parts have the tendency to activate our immune system. Okay, and only those part antigenic determinants, they have the power, or they have the tendency to activate the immune system. When our immune system will activate, we will have the response. Our immune system will respond also. The immune system, how this immune system is going to respond, by showing the by having the cough or like that, or by giving some other type of immune responses in the form of itching of other types of things. So the things is that we have to focus on the antigenic sites. So I started focusing on the antigenic sites that are basically the exposed portion of the spike protein. So just to see here. So this is basically the spike protein. We have this one is the spike protein. And when I predicted the antigenic determinants here, antigenic sites here, I came to know that there are almost like 11 antigenic sites that I have predicted in this spike protein of the SARS coronavirus. And to my surprise also, because we use all kinds of machine learning tools and such type of software, so that have the program to predict such type to make such type of predictions also. So all the antigenic sites were surface exposed. On the left side, yeah, like you can see here, that in the brown is the exposed portion. And this brown portion is the exposed portion of the spike protein, and only this exposed portion can be antigenic in nature, and only the exposed portion is getting interacted with the immune system, the cells of the immune system, and other cells of our body. So what I found from my studies is that there are basically 11 antigenic sites that are present on the in the spike protein of the SARS coronavirus 2. So now the thing is that now we have to find out that what these antigenic determinants are doing. What are in this type of antigenic determinants that we have to know, because by just seeing this one, that this is the first if I talk about the first antigenic determinant, this L, F, R, A, S, N, L, like this, you know. So this is by seeing this or by just looking at this, we cannot infer that what could be the outcome or what could be the pathophysiological outcome of this type of antigenic determinants. We have to do some more studies or more analysis on this one to like, you know, to have some data or have some prediction that okay, this particular antigenic site has this type of features, and because of this we can expect this type of immune system activation of this type of immune system, and we can expect this type of pathophysiology. So see, this is the spike protein, and in the spike protein I have underlined the regions where we had the antigenic determinants. It's not important. So this is very important slide. Here on the top we have SNNLD, then where we have STEI, then IRISN. Okay, all these at the top, these are the antigenic determinants that I predicted in the spike protein of the SARS coronavirus. See, now when I did further analysis on these antigenic determinants, I found that these antigenic determinants are also found, these antigenic determinants, they are also found in some other pathogens, in the antigens or in the toxins of some other pathogens also. So in total, I found 15 pathogens. In total, I found 15 pathogens. It may I mean to say that these antigenic determinants, the similarity, these antigenic determinants that are present in the spike proteins, they are similar to the antigenic determinants that are present in the antigens and the toxin from the Mycobacterium tuberculosis, Mycobacterium leprae, Bacillus anthracis, like this. So we have the influenza also, we have the Plasmodium also, we have Vibrio also, we have Yersinia pestis also. So I mean to say that these antigenic determinants that are present in the SARS coronavirus, spike protein of the SARS coronavirus, similar type of antigenic determinants that are present also present in the Mycobacterium tuberculosis also. So now we can justify, now we can say that if Mycobacterium tuberculosis is giving us a pathophysiological sign, means coughing also, and sneezing also, congestion in the chest, so we can have similar type of complex of we can have similar type of clinical symptoms in case of SARS coronavirus 2 also, and that's what we are all are seeing here. Okay, the same case of the Plasmodium falciparum, I predicted, I found that these antigenic determinants, they have the similarity with the toxins, or the antigens that are present in the Plasmodium falciparum also. So we can rule out this possibility that because of this antigenic sites, we are having the same types of symptoms that we used to have when we are getting infected with the Plasmodium falciparum. So this type of scenario, this type of results I found, and that was really very interesting. And when I did this analysis, so that time there was no scientific clues regarding, and there was no scientific clue, and there was not any published work, scientific work that was able to say that why we have the complex pathophysiology. So with this, when I was like, you know, I sent this manuscript to journals also, and with this thought, there was like a lot of comments also. So I tried my level best, and I respond to all the comments, and finally this manuscript got accepted also. Now this is accepted in Immunobiology journal. It has like impact factor of 2.8 or 9, something like that. And it's a very good journal of the immunology, very reputed journal of Elsevier or Springer. I think Springer is there, Springer journal. So these antigenic determinants that I found in the SARS coronavirus 2, they have the similarity with the antigens that are present in the Mycobacterium tuberculosis, Mycobacterium leprae, Bacillus, Borrelia, Clostridium, Helicobacter, Listeria, Staphylococcus, Streptococcus, Vibrio, Yersinia, Falciparum, Plasmodium, influenza virus, and all. So with this is the story of one protein. I'm just talking about the one protein. If I take the another protein of the SARS coronavirus, say if I take the membrane protein or the annual protein, if I conduct similar type of analysis, maybe I can come with some other antigenic determinants from other pathogens also. But this is the story of only one spike protein, because this protein is very, very famous. This protein is the first protein that is interacting with our immune system or also interacting with our cells. So it is worth to mention the contribution of this particular protein first. So that's what I have done here. So I hope you all are convinced with this result. So the part of the conclusion of this part, second part, is that SARS coronavirus is very dangerous, that we all know from the first part. Each age group is vulnerable. Of course, we know. Earlier we had a thought. Earlier we were like, we were taught by the newspaper, we were taught by the experts and the scientists that yes, only the immunocompromised and the aged people and those having some clinical histories, they are more prone to this particular type of disease. But in my opinion, I don't think that this is the case. Anyone can get infected with this virus, and there is some complex genetics also involved. There are complex genetics also. The role of ion channels is also there. So we cannot neglect the contribution of many other aspects, and that are basically contributing towards the pathology of the SARS coronavirus 2 or the COVID-19. So we all are vulnerable to this particular disease. We cannot say that if we am healthy and I'm going to jogging every day and I do yoga every day, I'm taking food, everything, anything, maybe if there is something in related with the problems in your calcium ion channels or some other ion channels, there is some genetic problems, there are some mutations, you may get infected with this virus. So we do not have to keep any kind of myths in our brain, and we have to be very careful from this disease. So the take home message from this particular part is that I already mentioned that the antigenic part of the SARS coronavirus has the similarity to the antigenic determinants that are present in 15 pathogens that I predicted. So our vaccines are also designed taking this such type of antigenic determinants. The subunit vaccines that have been designed or other kind of vaccines, whole organism vaccines, they are also designed in such a way that when we take the vaccines, so our immune system gets activated, and our immune system take care of that particular pathogen that we are getting in the form of vaccine. So in vaccine also we are getting the virus, a part of virus or the whole virus, So the thing is that the virus is used to be attenuated either or inactivated. Just the difference is this thing. So that virus would not be able to infect us. But yes, our immune system will get activated by such vaccination or vaccines. And what would happen here is that our immune system will activate and will produce some type of cells that we can say effector cells and the memory cells, and the memory cells will take care about the infection in future. So if we are vaccinated, it means that we have already a memory response in our system, our body. So even if we have sometime in future we will have the infection naturally, our immune system will take care about that one. About the COVID myths and facts, we recently had a very good and informative international virtual conference. I was the organizing secretary of that particular event, and I was blessed with the gracious presence of our president, sir, Professor Deshmukh Sahab, also in particular that event. Professor Deshmukh Sahab gave a very beautiful lecture in that one. So now I am coming to the third part of my talk, that is basically pulmonary PGTA chelation therapy and the synthetic IgG peptide based therapy. So like if we if we start thinking about the science in a very simpler way, because when we learn many things, so then we start doing the simpler things. When we read 5 10 books, our thoughts gets very simpler. So when this virus was the emerged in 2019, and when we had the first lockdown, I started thinking about I also started everybody started thinking about designing some kind of drugs or something, and everybody tried their level best and they reached to some extent also. But by that time I was not very interested in the vaccination. I like vaccination interested in vaccination, I mean to say, I was not very much interested in designing such some kind of vaccine candidate or something like that. But in my previous uh, paper that I talked about, in that one I talked about the vaccination also. I found some vaccine candidates also, and that is already all published. But in this part, I would be talking only about the things that are very simpler to apply on the patients, and that these two therapies, this pulmonary EDTA chelation therapy and synthetic RG-based peptide, this is also a published result basically. So these are all authenticated by the experts of the journals also. So there is nothing to question about this particular type of therapies. Yes, of course, if you have any questions or queries, you can ask me. So what was in this therapy? We all know that the mechanism of virus entry. We know that this is this spike proteins. It's when it interact with the cell membrane of our epithelial cells of the lungs. We are talking just about the epithelial cells, but it can enter into any kind of other cells also. So research is going in this direction also. So this virus, there will be some receptors present on the surface cell membrane of the epithelial cells of the lungs, and that will interact with the spike protein that are present on this virus. And this virus, the genome of this virus will get its entry uh, into the genome of this virus gets entry into the our host cells, our cells, basically epithelial cells. And what it will be going and what it will be doing after going inside the cells, it will hijack our cellular system, it will hijack our cellular machinery, and the cells will now produce the proteins that are basically what the virus will want from us. So the cells will produce the viral proteins. And what viral proteins? The viral proteins, viral capsid protein, viral membrane protein, virus spike proteins, and what everything will integrate, and they will produce virons. And these variants they will go outside of the cells, and they will infect other type of other cells of our body. So this is basically what our cells do for the virus. When the virus genome is going inside, so our cells, they will start producing the viral proteins. The viral proteins, they will they will integrate among each other, and they will form a virion, and that virion will go outside and it will start infecting other cells. So, the question when we had the lockdown, the question that was in my mind, I read about the SARS coronavirus first, and I read about the SARS coronavirus 2 also. And the question in my mind was that why we had, with this virus, as SARS coronavirus 2, we have more pathogenesis, why we have more transmissibility, what we can say, uh, uh, in case of SARS coronavirus 2. So for this, as a science background, the first thing that what we can do is the comparative study. So the way I also started with the same thing, So what I did, I compared the spike protein of the SARS coronavirus 1 and the SARS coronavirus 2. Sorry, it's written here 2019 and COE. Now it is SARS coronavirus 2 basically. Okay. So what I did, I compared the sequence of the spike protein that is originating from the SARS coronavirus 2 1 and the SARS coronavirus 2. So this is the pairwise alignment. So we can see where are the differences, where we have the differences. the part that has been underlined is basically the receptor binding domain of this spike protein. This is the in brief we say RBD domain of this spike protein that basically interacts with the receptors that are present in on the surface of our cells, lungs epithelial cells or other cells. So this is the part that interacts with the receptors that are present on our cells. So what I found, I found many things here, but the most important thing what I found here was that I found a motif, a very important motif that was called as the RGD motif. RGD motif, and that this RGD motif is uh, is the resultant of mutation in the SARS coronavirus 1, where we had the K that's got changed to R, because GD is same in both cases, just K is changing to R, but the KGD is not a motif. It's not a motif. It has no functional relevance, but RGD is a very strong motif. It has a very authenticate a well-established function that if any protein will have this RGD, if any protein will have RGD, that protein will have a high tendency. I can say like a not just 100 times, so 1000 times the tendency of that proteins to bind to the human cells would increase by a fold of 1500 times. So now you can all imagine that there was a KGD in the SARS coronavirus 1, and that SARS coronavirus was able to infect the lung cells to 1x. So now with this RGD, this SARS coronavirus 2 is able to infect the lung cells 500 times more as SARS coronavirus 1 can do. So now we can understand, now we can we can know why we have the more pathogenicity of this virus, why we have more transmission. Think if the virus is able to interact with the uh, the the lungs epithelial cells very tightly, we cannot imagine that if it is like interacting 500 times more strongly than the SARS coronavirus, of course the infectivity of that particular virus would be very, very high, and that's what we have seen. And when there was many theories, there was many theories, and this results I got by the end of March 2020. So the lockdown started on 23rd or 22nd of March 2020, and by the end of that particular month, I was able to have this result. And in next 7 days, I was with some other analysis also. I was able to write the complete manuscript, and I submitted my first manuscript on this particular thing. I think on 10th of April or in the first or second week of April, with some other data. So, and I designed the therapy also, and I sent that paper for publication. So what is the importance of this RGD motif? I talked about the RGD motif, and because many of you will be saying or maybe thinking that just the K is changing to R, but it's not just K is changing to R. With only a single mutation, we can have a drastic functional complications. So this RGD motif basically is the same motif that is also present in the fibronectin. It is also present in the laminin. It is also present in vitronectin, and this RGD motif is also the same motif that usually we quote on the biomaterials like petri dishes and the tea flask to promote cell attachment. It has a validated role that these proteins we used to have the coating of the fibronectin on the petri dishes, on the tea flask that we use in the cell culture. And what is the role of this fibronectin? The fibronectin, what it promotes, it encourages the cell attachment. When our cells they come, they attach, And why these cells are attaching? These are attaching just because the fibronectin has RGD motif. If we remove the RGD from the fibronectin, our cells will not be able to attach to the fibronectin. So this RGD has the very important functional role. And second thing is that in case of RGD, when we add bivalent ions such as calcium, and when we add some ions such as magnesium, these ions, they promote cell adhesion. They, like, because of RGD, we are having the cell attachment. And when we add calcium and magnesium, we are furthering, we are further promoting the cell adhesions. So this type of scenario, this type of things that came in like front of me, and I was very excited to have such type of results with me. So then I thought that, okay, if lungs are getting infected with this particular viruses, so what kind of proteins that are present in the lung cells, especially the epithelial cells. So when I searched this thing in the literature, I came to know that integrins, and they have high affinity for the RGD motif. This was well established by the other researchers in the literature, and it is well known also. So I came to know that integrins, they have strong affinity for RGD. So if lung cells would have the integrins, there I can sell my story by saying that yes, the integrins are there in the lung cells, epithelial cells, and the integrins, they have high affinity for the RGD, and the RGD is present in the spike protein of the SARS coronavirus 2, but not in the spike protein of the SARS coronavirus. Please remember. So with this motif that I present in the SARS coronavirus 2, these integrins that are present on the if these integrins are present on the surface of the lung epithelial cells, these integrins may bind to the RGD motif and can give a high, a high, very good amount of, interaction of the virus with the lung cells. So I try to see if the lung cells, they have integrins or not. So to my surprise, I came to know that yes, of course, lung cells also, they have high expression of integrins. Lung cells, they have high expression of integrins. So see, there are many integrins present in the lung cells, and so I found that these integrins, these have high expression in the lung cells, and the integrins, they can bind to the RGD motif, and this RGD motif is present in the spike protein of the SARS coronavirus. So what was the result? What we can rule out from this one is that integrins may possibly be involved in interacting with the viral spike protein via the RGD motif, for facilitating the viral entry into the host cells for infection and multiplication. This was my thought. This was my hypothesis, and this hypothesis, I worked on this hypothesis. I did some analysis, and I came with the results all results were supporting my hypothesis also. And then I started selling this hypothesis. And then what I did, that I tried to dock the spike proteins onto the integrins. I have to check whether these integrins and the spike protein is also interacting with each other or not. So when I did this experiment, I came to know that yes, the integrins, they are interacting with the spike protein, and exactly at the point where the spike proteins has the RGD motif. So this was also very interesting. Second interesting thing that I found here is that the site where this spike protein was docking on the integrins, all the site was surrounded by the calcium binding sites. The site was like surrounded by the calcium binding site. Maybe here I can show in this figure, on the right side, there the green one is the RGD motif, that is interacting with the integrins that is in blue and red, and the red dotted circle, which I have marked here, is basically the calcium binding sites that are present in the integrins. So think the RGD is meant for addition. This addition will become more strong or more effective when we will be having the calcium sites, or when we will be having the calcium. Role of the calcium is involved. So if we can see the calcium ion binding sites, so now we can say that this integrins, they are binding with the RGT motif that is present on the spike protein, and this particular event is also using the calcium, and this calcium is going there and is helping the virus to attach more firmly to the integrins. And because of this role of calcium, we can have a more strong interaction of the virus with the host epithelial cells via the integrins. The integrins is the receptor basically, So now with this, I came to know, and I understood that because we all know that, because it's a very common that ACE2 is the receptor of the spike protein. Okay, agree. I have no problem. But the ACE2 was the receptor of the SARS coronavirus 1 also. It is this receptor for the SARS coronavirus 2 also. If in both situations we have the same scenario, why we have more infection in case of SARS coronavirus 2? So is there any alternate receptor? If we say maybe yes, so why not integrins? I have demonstrated everything. I have showed everything. I have proved my hypothesis that yes, these integrins, they have strong affinity for the RGD. Spike protein has the RGD, and RGD, they also require calcium, and the integrins have calcium binding sites all around the docking site of the spike protein onto the surface of the integrins. So we can say that yes, probably beside ACE2, I cannot say that it's not there. ACE2 has no contribution, but yes, of course, I can say that yes, there is an alternate receptor for the spike protein of the SARS coronavirus 2 that has also a role in high increased rate of pathogenesis of the SARS coronavirus and the transmissibility. So what I did then comes my therapy. So another thing is that very interesting here is that if SARS coronavirus 2 is taking the calcium, is using the calcium, we can expect a low level of calcium in our serum, because the calcium is going and helping SARS coronavirus to attach with the host cells. Yes, agree. So the same type of thing, I forgot to put here as a paper where they found that in all the SARS coronavirus patients, they found that there is low level of calcium in the serum. So it means that the calcium, the virus is taking the calcium from our system, our body, and it is using it for its own benefit, means for getting attached to the host cells where it is requiring the calcium. And if we will be having the calcium deficiency, we all know that calcium has role in heartbeat also, it has role in nervous system also, it has roles in the muscles also, and the same types of symptoms we have seen. We had the muscle ache, we had the problems in the muscles, we had the problems in the bones also, we had problems in breathing also, because the calcium is required everywhere, and the calcium was being used by the virus for its own benefit. So my story had if I was able to explain the role of the calcium at the system level also, so with this I started writing a paper also. Then but when it comes to the therapy part, then I thought that, oh, what could be the therapy, so did in the cell culture, when we use the petri dishes, and the petri dishes, the floor is coated with the fibronectin, and when there is a coating, when we put the cells they attached, and when we put the cells and the media that has calcium and magnesium, our cells get attached to that fibronectin layer, you know. And when we require these cells, what we do, we put some chelation agents, we put some chelation agents that break that particular type of bonding of the cells with the fibronectin, you know. So the same thing I proposed, that we can use the chelation agents. And what we have the chelation agents in hand, we have EDTA, we have EGTA, and similar type of other substances, compounds, that when we add to our culture, these chelation agents, what they do, they chelate the calcium ion. If they will chelate the calcium ions, the calcium ions would not be available to the virus to make a interaction with the host cells. And in this way, we can discourage the virus host interaction. Same thing I proposed. Same thing I proposed. I just want to skip that one. So I propose this EDTA chelation therapy, in which what we do, if we can use this therapy in a targeted way. If we use this therapy specifically for the lungs, what we can do, the virus is using the calcium, and if we will use this EDTA chelation therapy, we can chelate all calcium ion. We can chelate all calcium ion, and the virus would have no calcium ion available for mediating its interaction with the host cells. And in this way, we can get rid of high infection, at least, you know. And it is this EDTA chelation therapy is a well-known therapy. It has been applied for metal toxicity, you know, if, or some other type of diseases also. It is a FDA approved treatment therapy. So the my therapy was something like this. See here. So what we can do here, we can take the sodium EDTA in the form, and we can inhale it through the nebulizer or inhaler. What this EDTA will go to the lungs, and what it will be doing, it in the right side we have the virus, the star-shaped virus, and the second one is a receptor, our cells, and the calcium is there, you know, in the yellow. So RGD, because of the RGD and because of this calcium, we have this interaction, you know. But when we will be adding the EDTA, when we will be inhaling the EDTA, and EDTA will be going inside our lungs, EDTA will go inside our lungs. EDTA will chelate, you know, that this yellow one, this yellow here was basically here. It should be here. It was here. It should be here. But because this EDTA has taken up this calcium, so now this virus is now not able to interact with this receptor now. And what we can assume, what we can think here is that when we will be chelating the calcium using the EDTA, we can discourage virus interaction with the host cells, and in this case, we can get rid of this particular disease, and we can take care of this virus. So, here is also the same thing is represented in some other way. On the top part, we have the normal disease cells. Normal disease cells. I mean to say, when we do not have the therapy here. So the disease state, we have the green spike virus with the spike proteins, and these spike proteins, they are using the calcium, and with the help of the receptor, this virus is entering into the host cell. Okay, but now see, when in the bottom side, we have, when we will be inhaling through nebulizer or inhaler or some other mean, we can do intravenous injections also, because with the injection, this EDTA will go to all parts of the body also. It will be going to the you know, the lungs alveoli also. So it will take care about the virus. So the blue is the receptor, the green is the virus, the yellow. but this yellow has been taken chelated by the EDTA now. So this virus will not be able to attach. This viruses will not be able to attach to the receptor present on the host cells, and whose virus would not be able to enter into the cells. So this was basically the therapy. So the additional benefits of this therapy was that this can be effective against the disintegration of the SARS coronavirus 2. This, the EDT has the property to disintegrate the virus, because the calcium and the other divalent ions, these have also the role in the integration of the virus. All the proteins, they will come and they will integrate into a virus. So they such type of integration, they need calcium also. If we will chelate the calcium, we will be able to some extent to distinguish the virus also. So can effectively inhibit the excessive immune response and production of cytokines. So there are some studies that have shown that with the help of the ETTA, we can suppress our immune system, and the cytokines that are produced, too much amount of the cytokines, like cytokine storms, that has a role in multiple organ failure in case of SARS coronavirus 2. And this EDTA, it has the antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and immunosuppressive effect also. So, we can stabilize the disease patients also to some extent, especially the aged and immunocompromised patients. And the best part of this one is that this virus is not only effective, this EDTA therapy is not, EDTA chelation therapy is not only effective against the SARS coronavirus 1 or 2, but it can be effective against other types of viruses or the mutant strain of virus that may emerge in future also. There are of course some potential potential side effects of this particular type of therapy, but yes, here the case is to save the life, and we have to make a priority that we have to save the life. Of course, if we are getting some symptoms or some side effects, we have to neglect them. We do not have to think about them, because here the case is to save the life of the patients. So this is all about my therapy. These are the references. I published this one it got published in newspaper also, and I was also recognized among the top 200 researchers. My research was also recognized among the top 200 researchers in India by the Ministry of Human Resource Development and AICTE. And I would like to thank the Mohanlal Sukhada University and the administration for providing me the infrastructure facility. And I have almost like 6 publications in the field of SARS coronavirus 2. So the one here, here, this one is the one that I talked about when I was talking about the mysteries of the SARS coronavirus 2. The antigenic sites in the SARS coronavirus 2 spike protein RBD show molecular similarity with the pathogenic antigenic determinants and harbor peptides for vaccine development. So this is already published in immunobiology. Second is another related with the vaccine, and here this is a review paper. These two are not related with the SARS coronavirus. This is related with the therapy that I have designed, and this is also already published. There are some 2 more papers. I was not able to accommodate it all 6 here, but this is basically what I have related with the SARS coronavirus 2. So thanks to you all. Stay home, stay safe. The take-home message is that only I and you, like only me and you, can do the things. So we do not have to wait for the government. We do not have to wait for others to do something for us. It's only us that we have to do something. So this is we always do such type of academic events, and in case if somebody needs my help for anything, we recently had a very good event on the myths and the facts of coronavirus, where we had the speakers from the Cambridge University, from the Netherlands, also from China, also from Malaysia, also Professor Deshmukh Sahab was also there. So it was a very successful event. So if anyone needs some kind of help from my side, I'm always ready to help. So with this, I just want to thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir,
Dr. Swati?
sir, hi, yes, sir. Am I audible? Yeah.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
sir. Thank you so much, sir, for this wonderful session full of knowledge. And sir, a few of the questions are here from the participants. The
Yes, please.
first one is, yes, sir. The first one is from Dr. Rakesh, and he is saying that which